We traveled all the way here to the Tour de France to see Team Visma use JTEKT's only hybrid ceramic ball bearing.
I'm Courtney with JTEKT, and today we're going to talk about deep groove radial ball bearings. Deep groove radial ball bearings, obviously the rolling element is a ball, so they're going to have balls in it. They're going to have what we call an outer race and an inner race. And all of those materials that I just talked about, the ball, the inner race, and the outer race, are going to be made out of 52-100 steel. Now the cage is typically going to be made out of a low carbon steel, which is, the cage doesn't really carry any load, so it's not going to be made out of the same material as the races and the ball. Now the size ranges for deep groove radial ball bearings start at about 5 millimeters, so very small, all the way up to 500 millimeters, or even some are larger than that. And what are these bearings designed to do? When we talk about anti-friction bearings, one of the characteristics is the type of load that it's going to take. So a deep groove radial ball bearing is designed to take basically a medium type, what we call medium type radial load, and then a slight axial load, or a light axial load, which is the shaft wanting to go through the bearing this way. Now, what does the deep groove refer to? It's actually the race, what's guiding the ball around inside the bearing. And so that groove basically captures the ball inside of this bearing. That deep groove allows for some misalignment, okay? But it also keeps the bearing together. So as well as misalignment characteristics, the other nice thing about a deep groove ball bearing, which kind of makes it unique, is that it's symmetric. So it doesn't matter which way I install this bearing. So a lot of times we're going to be pressing this bearing onto a shaft, and so it doesn't matter which way we put that bearing on. Now, a lot of bearings are not symmetric, so this is somewhat of a unique feature. Another important feature of deep groove ball bearings is that they can seal. So a sealed bearing looks something like this, where you've got a rubber seal, or it might be shielded. So it looks like this. Now, you can't do this with most ball and roller type product. So that's what makes deep groove ball bearings, is being able to seal that. Now, if we're able to seal it, what that also means is that we can put grease inside there, so we can lubricate it as well, and the grease will stay inside the bearing. So when we talk about sealed bearings versus shielded bearings, remember, a seal means that we're actually sealing it. So there's actual contact. So that rubber is actually contacting the inner ring. So that's going to create a lot of heat and drag, but it's also going to completely seal the bearing. Now, a shielded bearing, there's actually a little gap here. So there isn't contact. So as you can see, I can actually spin this bearing freely, like I would an open bearing. So that still holds the grease in pretty well, but it doesn't seal it from like dust and fine particles. So it's still going to allow, fine particles to come in, but it's going to keep most of the boulders and the big stuff out. So when we look at sealed versus shielded product, obviously, the speed ratings are going to be different. So the speed rating for a shielded product is going to be the same as an open bearing because there's no contact. Again, most other roller bearings and ball bearings, ball bearing types, they don't have seals, so you have to find some other way of keeping the lubricant inside the bearing. With deep groove ball bearings, you can also put on what's called a snap ring. Now, a snap ring is, we cut a groove in the OD of the bearing, and we put this collapsible ring. Now, what's that ring for? Well, we put this bearing inside of a housing, so the device that it's sitting inside of, and inside that housing bore is a groove. And so we can actually push this bearing in, that ring will compress, and then it'll snap open inside that groove inside the housing. And that locks the bearing in place. So again, a very unique feature for deep groove ball bearings. Typically, you can't get this with any of the other types of bearings. Some of the other things that we can do with it, we can use ceramic balls instead of steel. So this is a ceramic ball versus a steel ball. Ceramic is interesting in the sense that it doesn't allow electricity to go through it. It's an insulated product. It's an insulated material. And why is that important? Well, when we expose bearings to electricity, if the electricity goes through, if a current goes through the bearing, then it'll destroy the bearing. It'll actually pull pieces of material out of the race, and the bearing will fail prematurely. So by using ceramic balls, we actually insulate the bearing. We don't allow electricity to go through. Very important in wind turbine designs, in the generators, and again, high voltage type applications. Now, do we offer this product in precision, higher precision? Yes, but it's not very popular. So So that's what a deep groove ball bearing is, a deep groove radial ball bearing. Why use a deep groove radial ball bearing? Well, it's the most popular bearing in the world. So more than 50% of the product bearings that are out there are going to be deep groove radial ball bearings. And because they're so popular, keeps the cost down because of the number of competitors and also because of how much product there is. So they're high volume. The product is made in high volume. Now, what also being popular is that it has a wide range of sizes. Another why you would use a deep groove ball bearing is because you can seal it or shield it. And so if you want a fully integrated bearing that has the grease and it's grease for life, so when we seal a bearing and we put lubricant in it, this bearing is going to be sealed. It's going to operate until it fatigues. So it's going to operate for the full life. So once it's installed, it's done. You don't have to re-lubricate it. You don't have to find some way of getting lubrication into it. It's sealed for life. That's a huge advantage. The other big thing is, we kind of covered it a little bit earlier, is how easy it is to install. So because it's symmetric, these bearings will typically be pressed onto a shaft. So here's our shaft. What that means is that the bore of this bearing is going to be smaller than this shaft. I've got it the opposite here. So we're actually going to have to force this bearing onto the shaft. Once we do that, that bearing will actually lock onto the shaft because the bore of this bearing is smaller than the shaft, so it's going to grip it because we're going to stretch that inner ring to get it on, either by heating it up or by using physical force, and that'll lock that bearing on the shaft. Really easy to install. The other nice thing about ball bearings is they have low friction. We talked about that in the bearing basics. So because we have point contact, so instead of line contact, as we would with a roller, okay, so that point contact is going to generate less friction. So typically ball bearings can go faster than roller bearings. So when we talk about design flexibility, because it has such a vast product offering, and what I mean by design flexibility, so these two bearings both have the same bore size. They both have the same bore size, but yet look, they're different on the OD and they're actually different on the width. Okay, so we have 6 different types of ball bearings that all will fit on the same shaft that are going to have a different width and a different OD. So the product offering is huge. For a design engineer, this is great because that gives that design engineer all kinds of flexibility on what size bearing that they can use in an application. So where are deep groove ball bearings used? They're used everywhere. So they're the most popular bearings. So you're going to find them in electric motors. It's the most popular application. You're going to find them in gearboxes, automobile hubs. There's ball bearings in the engine. Agricultural applications like disc bearings, combines, tractor transmissions, and engines. Tons of consumer products like bicycles, the most popular, skateboards, rollerblades, power tools, fans. So in summary, ball bearings, deep groove ball bearings are low cost. They can be sealed and greased, easy to install. There's a huge product offering, so you have multiple sizes to choose from. That wraps up our deep dive into radial deep groove ball bearings, the most common and versatile bearing type used worldwide. Stay tuned for more bearing training from JTEKT, formerly known as Koyo.